Hello everybody, welcome back to Tomorrow and Still. So if you don't know, I haven't actually been like super into reading for very long. It's only been like 3-4 years now that I have been reading regularly. Before that, I didn't think I liked reading. And in the few times that I did say I liked reading, I didn't know what I liked to read, even though I thought I did. So it wasn't until my senior year of high school, so about, I don't know, it's been like 3-ish years, that I actually really figured out what I enjoy reading. You know, I've seen a lot of people do videos about books that have shaped their tastes or shaped them as people. So I figured what I would do is something similar, because I have a very interesting list of 10-ish books that really have shaped who I am as a reader and my tastes. And I have some books, a lot of these books I do enjoy, but there's actually a couple on here that I straight up don't like, because I think that's even more important, because my journey as a reader and figuring out what I do like to read was a lot of trial and error, because I have very unique tastes that a lot of people don't share. So I had to go through a lot of trial and error to figure out what I did actually like. So yeah, I have 10 books here to that kind of outline my journey as to how I got here. So yeah, let's just get into it. Okay, so the first book that I have on this list is an interesting book, because it really hammered home for me, or made me it didn't really hammer home, it made me realize for the first time that what I like to read isn't just fantasy. Because I for the longest time I thought I liked reading fantasy, and that was the only thing I liked reading. And like when I did read fantasy, I didn't get very far into it, so I just thought that I wasn't good at reading. But this book made me realize that there are other things out there that I enjoy reading, and that book is House of Leaves. This book made me realize that what I enjoy reading is the novel that breaks rules or does something different or is more difficult or more intellectually engaging. Because this book has a lot going on in it, and it is hard and it is different. It is very different. If anybody here knows anything about this book, you know that this book is fucking weird. Like incredibly weird. Like, let me bring up The Hole in the Wall, because I read this my junior year in high school, and I did for a class project, which was fun to explain my teachers what I was actually reading. But yeah, this is an actual page in this book. And this is actually a section that goes on for pages and pages and pages. So it was this book that really, like, when I picked this up and I heard the concept of it and like heard it as like a puzzle box, as something that is a little bit more engaging because it does different things with words and does really weird things with how they're typeset, I was really engaged, or I was really intrigued. And when I actually picked it up, I got super, super engaged, because one, the story is fascinating, but also this book taught me how to engage with symbolism. Because how the house can be interpreted as a symbol for depression, and how that extends onto the kids and all that. Like this is really the book that, like, for the first time ever, I put the things that I learned in English classes to practice. And this taught me that I enjoy doing that. But I just had to find the right book to do it. And so it was really here that I realized, shit, I actually like reading. I just need to find the right books. And so this is the first book that really got me into this whole reading thing. The second book I have on this list isn't as much of a book as it is an author, and that is H.P. Lovecraft, because this is the first book on this list that is kind of the I don't like it very much. And it's less of an I don't like it and more Lovecraft is, I don't want to say a guilty pleasure, because I don't like reading him. I don't like him, but I find him so fascinating. Like, I think he is a fascinating study as to, one, that, like, his prose is terrible, right? I'm just going to come up front and say that his prose is freaking horrible. I'm just going to come up at front and say that his prose is freaking horrible. I hate it. It's so dense and flowery and terrible, and he doesn't know how to structure a story. But also, I have to admit that sometimes his terrible writing serves the story and serves the horror. Because sometimes, like, if you're in the right mindset, Lovecraft hits. Very specific stories of his hit hard. I remember being genuinely terrified at the end of Shadow over Innsmouth, but you also have to, I also remember being incredibly bored at the beginning of the Shadow over Innsmouth because of the goddamn rant that the dude at the bus station goes on about the Innsmouth people and the Innsmouth look and all that, and it's terrible. He's so bad. He's such a bad author, but for some reason he works. Sometimes, very occasionally, sometimes. And I hate it. But it was also, like, I think Lovecraft, for me, was my realization that writing style and prose is very effective for me. Because your prose ties back into the feeling and the emotions that your story invokes way more than just the story itself. Because again, tying back to that, I thought I was a fantasy person, and oftentimes fantasy has a very basic prose style, I guess. Like Brandon Sanderson, for example, has very, very unimpressive prose, but he does have good stories. And so, like, I always thought it was just the story itself that would get the most emotion out of me. But Lovecraft was like, maybe there is value in different prose style and unique prose style. Maybe not this one specifically, because this one is terrible, but the fact that the very stiff academic writing style of his stories could actually sometimes make the story work better, really got me thinking about how different writing styles could actually do a lot. So, Lovecraft. So for the second book on this list that I did not like in a row, and this novel straight up, like, yeah, I did not like this novel. This novel is really bad. It's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. And okay, it's not bad. It's not a bad novel. It's actually pretty good, but I did not enjoy it because I think I hedged my bets a little bit too far. Like, I went a little bit too far with I like super pretentious, or not pretentious, but like, I like super highbrow literature, right? So I decided, I'm gonna pick up James Joyce's first novel, because I did have to read a couple of his short stories for AP Literature. Like, I had to read The Dead, I think. A couple of stories that exist in the Dubliners, and I really enjoyed them. I really loved his short stories. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick up A Portrait of the Artist because I've heard about it. I've heard that it's very influential. It's very notable in the Bildungsroman genre, and it's James Joyce, and I like James Joyce. And then I picked it up, and then I realized that no, I do not like this James Joyce. Because this book it's written gorgeously, right? It is incredible prose and just absolutely gorgeous. And again, it's very important. It is really, really important, but it's James Joyce. So it's dense, very dense, to the point where there is literally further reading at the front of the novel. Like, after the introduction, which is, might I say, like 15, 20 pages long, there's a further reading section, because this book delves really deep into Irish society and the Catholic Church, and it so pretty much follows Stephen Daedalus, who is kind of a stand-in for Joyce himself, going through the Catholic school system and having troubles with his faith and coming to conflict with Irish politics and all that stuff. He's coming into his realization of who he is as an artist, as an author, as a writer. And, like, it's cool, but it's also so dry. It is bone dry. Like, nothing happens. in like altogether nothing happens. Like the most interesting part of the book is when he's in boarding school and he has the whole the time, like him going to boarding school and getting thrown into a bunch of mud and into a cesspit, and then he breaks his glasses, and that's the only interesting thing is when he's younger, because after that it just nothing happens. Like it's really boring if you're not super into Irish society and super dry Catholic society. So yeah, this was the book that made me realize, oh yeah, I still have to kind of be vaguely interested in what I'm reading. It just can't be, it's kind of the opposite end of Lovecraft. It was like Lovecraft taught me that prose can carry a story. Lovecraft taught, or Joyce, The Portrait of the Artist of a Young Man, taught me that prose won't always carry a story. So yeah, that's Portrait of the Artist of a Young Man. This was such a boring book. Next up, we've got The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. This book is tiny. It is so short. It is 180 pages. And that's what this book taught me is, oh my God, short, punchy little stories are so good. They're so powerful. I have actually a couple. A lot of the books on this list are really short after this. And this is part of the reason why, is because like I picked this up and I burned through it. I was like, holy shit, that was good. That was really, really powerful and effective. And like that's what this, like, I was like, I need to read more really short stuff, because the amount of things that this could do in 180 pages, the emotions that this evoked was so insane. And I was like, I need to read more of this, because I felt like getting in and out quick was so much more effective compared to all of the really, it was effective in a different way compared to all of the other like really long books that I've read. And this really taught me that, yeah, that different way I actually kind of prefer. I kind of prefer that really short, in and out quick. You don't get much time to really get used to them, I guess. I don't know. It's a really interesting and different way of experiencing a story that I very much enjoy. And it also really, it just gets you reading more when it's very easy to experience a story. You're not spending so much time, and it gets that motivation going, right? It's my ADHD of, I need at least some sort of reward. I need to actually feel like I'm making progress, and these short little books really help with that. So yeah, Housekeeper Professor. I also really like Asian literature. This is really good. Okay, next up, the only memoir I have ever enjoyed reading, Our Story by Rao Pingree. So this book is really interesting because this recounts the life of Rao Pingree, who grew up in China and fought in World War II, and pretty much it's about him and his wife. That's why it's Our Story. And what's so cool about this book, I think, is the fact that Rao Pingree himself illustrated it. And not only does this book have a gorgeous story about, love and perseverance and all that stuff, it is written with the most straightforward, like, punchy prose ever. Like, Hemingway got nothing on Rao Pingree. Like, let me just read the opening paragraph of this book. Like, you'll see what I mean. My first clear memories are of the ceremony that marked the formal start of my schooling. I was 8 years old. First, the right day had to be chosen. When it arrived, I was woken by a servant at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I washed and dressed and went to the main hall of our house, where everything was prepared. My father, mother, and the gentleman who was to initiate me into the mysteries of education were standing by the tablet that honored Confucius. Like, that's how this entire book is written, and oh my God, it hits. Like, it makes, and it stays that way the entire time. When people are dying, when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're separated, it hits so hard because of how, just frankly, the book is written. And it's opposite from Craft in a different way. It's that flowery language helps, but also simple language helps. Hemingway and like those kinds of authors, they have value just as much as Faulkner does, because being so blunt and frank about super emotional parts of your life can do some crazy things for the reader. And I loved reading this book. I very highly recommend it. And this is the only memoir I've actually like properly enjoyed reading. I don't like memoirs for some reason, but this one really hit real hard. I love it so much. So yeah, Our Story. Read more books written by poets and women, but poets. Okay, next up. So it's Song of Solomon. This is one of my favorite books of all time. And this really solidified, one, what I love about literature. Two, taught me that Toni Morrison is the GOAT. And three, really hammered home what I love reading about and the style of literature I do enjoy, which is vaguely surrealist, or slightly surrealist, but B, American. I love American literature. I love it, love it, love it. Southern Gothic literature, and just all over America. I love South American literature too, but also like United States American literature is so powerful for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why I love it. I just find the color that American literature has is so much more vibrant than any other type of English lit. And like Song of Solomon is kind of the perfect example of this, because like there is so much that goes on in this book, and I think it's Toni Morrison's masterpiece. Like even compared to Sula over there, like a lot of people say Sula is her finest work, but I think that Song of Solomon surpasses Sula so many times over. And yeah, it just really taught me that it's something about American literature and how Americans see the world in their writing that really just resonates with me for some reason. I don't know why. I have no idea why. I'm still trying to figure that out. But it was like I was reading a lot of Faulkner at this point in time. I was really getting into Faulkner at this point in time, but I thought it was just Faulkner in general. But then I read Song of Solomon and I adored it so freaking much. I was like, maybe it's just like American literature in general. And then I got into Hemingway. I read The Old Man of the Sea. I still need to read some more Hemingway, and I also need to read some more Steinbeck and other American authors, especially like African American. I was just like, this novel was my, maybe it's just like American literature is in Southern Gothic specifically that hits, like, tickles a nerve. And I don't know why or how, but it just does. And also this was my Toni Morrison is also a very good author that you should read more. And I'm reading more. I finished Sula, I have Jazz, and I have Paradise up there that I need to read. And I read Beloved too. And yeah, this woman knew how to write a novel. Holy shit. Okay, this is 8, 9, 10. Yep, this is number 8. So number 8 on the list is Ubik by Philip K. Dick. And so I'm not much of a sci-fi person. I'm not huge into the sci-fi. I do enjoy Philip K. Dick's shorter approach to sci-fi, but what this book did teach me, one goddamn scene in this book is my favorite thing that has happened in all of my reading, and I'm not joking, and it is the most mundane thing. So in this book, there's a bunch of weird shit that starts happening, right? And the characters get kind of roped into it, and they don't know what's going on, and time is seemingly going backwards for some reason. There's the mysterious substance called Ubik that keeps showing up and seemingly can stabilize the reversal of time and all that stuff. And so, the mystery is fresh at this point, and nobody really understands or can comprehend what's going on. And so, in a lot of books, people will just kind of try and figure it out via trial and error, or just kind of deal with it or whatever. In this book, the main character in his group of men literally find a fucking conference room, sit down, and scientific method their way through it. They literally, this is what we know, this is what's going on, like, this is what has happened so far, and then they brainstorm their way through it. They, like, literally theorize as to what's going on and then start testing it, and then, like, come up with methodologies for testing what they're going through. It was the most fascinating thing to read, because I've never, like, experienced a story where somebody does that to that extent before. Like, characters literally just sitting down and rationalizing their way through this whack-ass mystery. Like, I loved this book just for that one scene. I just want to rant about that scene. Oh, it's fascinating. Read this book. It's actually kind of a bit of a mindfuck, but also that scene is so good. God, good, well-written characters can sell you on a book. That's what this did. These are good, very well-written, very rational, smart characters. And, like, approaching a scene with rationality can do so much for an entire novel, because that one scene sold me on the rest of the book, and it's like only 80 pages in or so, right? Like, or like not even, it was probably like 50 pages in that's the conference room scene happens, and that sold me on the rest of the book, because, like, they could actually, like, tackle what was happening. I loved it. This was a really good book. And yeah, Ubik. Number 9 is At Swim Two Birds by Flann O'Brien. This recently got a reprint. And I'm really glad, because it hasn't been available for print in the United States for a long time. I actually read this digitally when I first read it, because it wasn't available in print. And oh my god, this book is so fascinating. So I'm not quite sure if I enjoyed reading it, but I think I did. How do I explain with this book? So this book is very surrealism. Very surrealist, very, very, very weird and wacky, and nothing makes sense, and it's all very metafictional, and the plot is kind of recursive and self-referential, and I love that. I love it, because it's so hard to engage with, because it's so dense. It's also very Irish and stupid and dumb and funny. I love surrealism. I love surrealism and Dadaism and just really stupid art that's stupid just to be stupid, right? And that's what this book is. Like, there is a moment at the end of the book where they're having a trial. Like, they're having, like, a court trial, and the prosecution, the characters that are prosecuting, one of their witnesses that they bring to the stand is a cow. Like a literal fucking cow. They bring a cow to the stand. But it happens so late in the book, and it's just such a random, like, thing that, like, you don't question it, because that's the rules of the book, right? Like, one of the characters in the book is a voice that belongs to a being that is a singular one-dimensional point in space that doesn't have any volume or mass or anything. It's just a voice, right? And, like, that's one of the characters. They're a fairy. He's a fairy, technically. It's just a weird book. It's so weird, but it's also really good. And it's super self-referential and critical and satirical. And it's very Irish. And, like, this is the Irish literature that I like. It has a lot of wit. It's very dry wit. It's hilariously dry, but it's so good. And, you know, it was just, I like satire and surrealism, and it was, like, I don't think I've ever been this engrossed in a novel before. And not out of this is a good book, because, like, that, I did that with Song of Solomon, I did that with Sula. Like, this was I am fascinated by what the hell is going on in this book. So yeah, it's just absurd. It is so stupid and fun, and I love that. I love surrealism, and this honestly taught me more about my just general tastes in art than it did for literature, because you don't really come across surrealist literature very much. This is it. This is, like, the one thing that everybody cites as surrealist art, because or surrealist literature because it is so surreal. Like everything, because like there is such a unclear blend. Like there is a line between where fiction and reality like are in a book, but this book just kind of smudges that line really heavily. So like you kind of have to suspend your disbelief way heavier, because like so this book is about characters in an author has his characters come to life. The mechanisms by which this happens, not explained at all. They just are, and you have to accept that. But then they also explained that the characters only have autonomy when the author is asleep. So what the characters end up doing is drugging the author so that he's always asleep, so they always have autonomy. And then they end up taking him to trial for all the crimes that he made them do because he's their author and all that stuff. And that's kind of the plot of the book. But then it's also wrapped in this like sub-narrative, like this frame narrative of all of that is stuff that the narrator of the actual book is writing. So all of that is all fictional, and this like, it's super meta. It's so meta, and I love that too. I love metafiction. And yeah, so that's kind of this had me engaging with the super literary theory side of things. And yeah, so that's just what this book taught me. It's so fun. It's stupid. I recommend it, actually. If you like Irish, this is good. And finally, number 10. Take it out of the thing. I could put any William Faulkner on this book, or on this list. But I'm obviously going to put a Fable on here because I have to show off my first printing of it. Yeah, well, you knew this was coming, right? You knew I had to talk about William Faulkner. And honestly, I've yapped about him enough on this channel and on my TikTok. I don't really need to explain why, but it really comes down to he taught me that prose is kind of what gets me going, right? I love good prose. I love good writing and good sentences, and beautiful sentences can make up for, or beautiful prose can make up for a little bit more of a lackluster story, because that's a lot of what Faulkner's stories are, is they don't have a lot going on in them. And like, if Hemingway was to write a Faulkner story, all of his books would probably be like 200 pages at most. But because Faulkner spends so much time with the words and with the writing and the experiences and the sensations and all that stuff, and like the memories and the overlapping, like folding, like sensations and narration, all of these books get really long, and that's kind of what I love. And there's so much value in that, and Faulkner really taught me that, especially when I read Absalom. Because like As I Lay Dying doesn't have a lot of that. As I Lay Dying is a lot of stream of consciousness, right? But once I read Absalom, and I had to trudge through the page-long sentences, that really taught me that there's a lot, there is a reason to write like that. And that reason can be very, very fascinating to engage with. And then I went on to read a bunch of his other novels, and then I eventually read a Fable, and like I got to this point where like Faulkner is kind of everything I love in an author in books, because his characters are infinitely complex. His sentences are just as complex. His prose and word choice and rhythm, nobody writes a sentence quite like William Faulkner. And that's kind of what fascinates me and can keep me engaged for entire books with stories that I would otherwise not keep my attention. And so like Faulkner was the one that really made me realize, more so than House of Leaves, that I do like reading. I just need to find the right author. And yeah, so that's kind of the biggest, like Faulkner is, I'm so glad I found him, because I don't think I would be reading nearly as much as I did if I hadn't of taken a chance with As I Lay Dying. And Now I'm here and I own a signed first printing of one of his Pulitzer Prize winning novels. And yeah, and I've read way more than I otherwise would have. So those are 10 books that I think have really shaped my reading taste. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And yeah, I'm wrapping up a couple of books now that I will have to talk about as like a summer reading wrap. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye, y'all.